The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you again today. Happy New Year, everyone. It's such a great thing to be part of this community and to talk with you directly. I am really have to warn you in advance. I'm just getting over a really bad cold. I got the big one. And if I start coughing, I'm putting myself on mute because it's not going to sound good. But I'm on the mend, and I certainly didn't want to cancel or postpone our show today. We have Denise Mange joining us. She is the author of Translating Your Pet's Behavior, a mindful approach to dog training. And, you know, the thing that really captured me with looking at Denise's book is that it speaks a lot about the energy that we share with the animals that we live with. And I just figured that she'd have something really important to share with us about, you know, maybe some of the experiences that all of you have had, either, you know, yourself, or maybe if you work with patients like I do with clients who have service animals or emotional support pets, or just, you know, noticing for yourself what a big difference having an animal in your home makes to you. And I just was really intrigued by the things that Denise was talking about that really seemed to relate to what it means to connect with and communicate with an animal in your home. And so I was inspired to bring her on, and I know it's going to be an interesting conversation. I hope that our listeners will take the time to write with questions or comments or thoughts about this topic today at instudio101@gmail.com, and join us in the conversation. And thank you, Denise, for joining us and being involved in our conversation today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, I've heard so many of your interviews and I've learned so much from each of them. So I'm really excited to bring pets into the discussion to kind of understand how they can help us expand our, you know, our understanding of ourselves, our relationships, and how they just improve our lives on so many levels.
Yeah, it is incredible. Listen, I know that you've had your own unique experience because, you know, in going through the book, I could see that you didn't start with being a pet trainer. You know, life was in going in a different direction. And I wonder if you could tell us where you started and how you made the transition back to pets, because I know it was, you know, part of your early life, your own sensitivity to animals, but then really as life progressed, you finished university, you got a job, and then, whoops, I'm heading in a different direction. Can you just explain a little bit about that trajectory to us?
Lily, I'm the last person who you would think I'd be on this show talking about dog training or pets' behaviors, because growing up in São Paulo, Brazil, I lived in an apartment building. So I didn't have a dog. I never had a traditional pet growing up. So, whereas a lot of pet trainers are like, I grew up with pets all my life. I speak about them fluently. For me, I had to learn everything in adulthood, which actually helped me become more empathetic and more understanding of the people I work with who are trying to raise their pets and work with them. So when I was young, I didn't have a traditional pet, but I always had a very strong empathic tie to animals, whether they were little caterpillars that I'd, adopt as pets, or, the butterflies around us in Brazil. I always felt that no matter how small, our animal companions had a soul and they were able to provide that emotional connection for us. So I always felt like probably many of your viewers very drawn to animal companions in the wild, domesticated everywhere. And so, I went to college, I studied communications, I worked on Madison Avenue with blue chip, ad agencies. And so after, a decade working in advertising, for anyone who's been in it, they know it's like dog years, right? It's crazy pace, crazy hours. I finally decided it was time for me to leave the corporate world. And one of the last accounts that I worked on was actually Purina. And so in that, I loved talking about, the pet parent relationship, cats, dogs, all of that. And I thought, you know what? I live in New York City now. If I'm going to leave the corporate world, what could I do? Well, let me open up a doggy daycare. I'd love to, be around pets all day. Everybody always needs a daycare for their pets in New York because we're working around the clock. And I figured if I'm going to do a doggy daycare, I should really learn something about pet behavior and dog training. So I did a course, studied all my dog training, did my hands-on practicum hours where I was working one-on-one with pets and their humans. And I fell in love with that. I fell in love with that relationship, observing the humans with their pets and vice versa. And I thought at that point, you know what? Forget the brick and mortar of a doggy daycare. This is what I want to focus on, the one-on-one training. And that kind of got me back on the path of connecting with animals, connecting with humans. And here we are today.
Wow. I bet you have a lot of stories that go along with those early transitions where you were learning how to work directly one-on-one with people. And, I imagine that it was pretty riveting to go from corporate life into your own business. I guess we have Purina to thank for that.
That's right. That's right.
Love
It was definitely an interesting transition, and I think what was really most fascinating about this transition is a couple, I'd say about a year into dog training, I was like, you know what? I don't know if this is right for me. There's got to be more than just bossing around dogs and teaching them how to fetch or do commands. So I almost backed out of dog training. But it was right around that time where I just had a huge aha. Things started opening really a lot more deeply for me when I'd walk into humans and, their pets relationship. I started seeing through a different lens. I started looking through the lens of motivation. Because what I found about a year into dog training was that some pet parents, they might go through the motions, they might do all the training, they might do all their homework, their dog might know every command under the sun, but the behaviors that they wanted to shift, especially on-leash reactivity, which is kind of like barking or lunging or being very scared during walks, that wasn't changing for the pet parent. They're doing all the homework, doing all the right things, putting in the hours, but nothing was shifting. And at that moment, I had a huge aha. I go, oh my gosh, we can't discount what's going on in the human's life. Because what I started realizing is when there were a lot of dogs who were reactive on leash, barking, I started seeing old patterns and trends. I started realizing that a lot of the pet parents, they were in their lives ungrounded. Maybe they were between jobs. They were unsettled in their relationship with their significant other. They weren't feeling very grounded in their lives. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, until we address that energy going on in the human's life, this dog is not going to change his behavior. And that's where I created this whole new approach to pet guardianship, which speaks to how the everyday interactions with our animal companions can really transform our lives. Because if our dog is having any experience or behavior that we're looking to shift, we really want to dive into the motivation behind it, because odds are it's reflecting something broader in our lives that's popping up not only with our pet, but maybe in our careers, in our personal relationships, in our family dynamics, in our friendships, and everywhere thereafter.
Well, that is a lot to take on board. Oh my goodness. So what you're saying is whether a person has their own unresolved issues, it's going to show up in their pet's behavior?
Exactly. So, this mindful approach to pet guardianship, what it does is it really bridges the gap between traditional dog training and pet guardianship and personal development. Because if we ascribe to the fact that our animal companions are some of the most honest and intimate relationships in our lives, in that they see us at our most vulnerable, we're able to be with them or around them without pretense. They see us when we're joyful, when we're crying, when we're laughing. Then they can serve as beautiful mirrors. They know us better than we know ourselves. Our energy enmeshes, we spend all that time together. And so it's only natural that their behavior kind of mirrors some of the themes, mindsets, habits, and attitudes and fears that we're experiencing in our life as well. We share that energetic field. We share those mindsets, that attitude, the moods of the home. So they can be a really amazing barometer to give us a hint into what we need to revisit, look at, analyze, and maybe even shift in our own lives.
So this idea of the behavioral mirror, I am also assuming that, that would work with somebody who is struggling emotionally and their pet is really attuned to that. Can you talk about maybe some of your experiences
Yeah.
where you've seen that a pet can do a really good job of answering an emotional need? Even, they don't have to be trained, because there are a lot of training organizations that, I work with veterans and police officers and other first responders and individuals who have experienced PTSD. And, a number of my clients, they have these incredible trained, support dogs. And I have to tell you, that's quite a few years of training, and not everybody qualifies for a animal who has had, 3 or 4, I think it's even up to 5 years of training. And, that's quite a bit. So, these dogs, they're very rare, and, it's not going to be available for everybody. And yet, I have heard from so many people that, they got a dog in their life who just seemed to be able to answer a certain need, or, a couple of cats that just fill the home in a way that, meets the heart's desire. I mean, can you just speak a little bit about that?
Mhm. Absolutely. So what I found in my, decade plus experience working with, thousands of clients at this point, I categorize pets, and that's dogs, cats, birds, lizards, snakes, anything, into two categories. There's the animal companions that mirror us, and then there's the natural balancers. So a lot of the dogs who work with, service, veterans, or, workforce dogs, they tend to be the balancers. So balancers are, whether it's a service dog or even just a dog in a home. Say in a traditional, family, there's a lot of stress, there's kids, there's crazy schedules, there's a lot of dynamics going on with the family. That dog that is a natural balancer might balance that stress by holding calm, stability, kind of steady energy, so that the members of the household can really draw on that calm and stability. Same goes for, service dogs. They tend to have that stable, calming stability. And it's interesting because I do find like pets, just like with humans, some have the vocation for that. And so there's some dogs that are really great service dogs, and then other dogs who just do better in a family environment.
That's for sure. Yeah.
So we have our balancers, and then on the flip side, we have our mirrors. So if that family that has those stressful schedules, lots of dynamics within the family, if they do not have a natural balancer, but they have a pet that mirrors them, that pet might have all sorts of behavioral issues. It might, bark a lot. It might have accidents in the home. It might be reflecting some of the internal dynamics that need to be addressed in the household. And a lot of times as humans, because of, dynamics and fear of judgment, we tend to try to sweep under the rug some of the human to human dynamics and relationships. But when they show up in terms of our pets, if our pet's having accidents in the house, for example, mirroring some of the, chaos or some of the fighting going on in the home, now I can't ignore that. I've got to pay attention. And that's where pets as mirrors really help us take a step back, address any underlying motivation, habits, dynamics, or triggers in our lives, and we have to process it.
Yeah, I mean, I also like the fact that you can see so clearly, like some animals are really not able to be that balancer. Like I hadn't thought of it in that language. Like we were talking earlier about my big Bernie Doodle, who was 120 pounds. He's no longer with us, but he's still in our hearts. Excuse me. And he was a real balancer, but I never looked at it quite in those terms. And we have a dog who's going to be 5 in April, and she is just all heart and full of sweet lightness. But man, she is not a balancer. She's a jumpy kind of, full of beans dog. And, even at almost 5, people will come into our home, and we have a lot of company. People are coming and going, and she still hasn't kind of been able to pick up on the, you just, you can't jump on these people. It's not an option. And, she's so disappointed if she can't do it, or, if we get her in the car, she just like, if she sees dogs on the street, she goes into like almost a screeching squeal because she desperately wants to play. So she has these interesting behaviors, which, that's not balancing. Those are not the balancing behaviors, right?
Are not. So what I love about that is, first of all, your energy just lights up when you speak of her. And I think every pet parent feels that way, right? Whether their dog is super chill or super bouncy and sassy, we just love them. And it's such a beautiful reminder that sometimes we don't realize that we're getting the pet that we need, right? We may have expected one thing, but we're getting the complete opposite. And that's because, as you speak of your pet, Suki, every description that you talked about with her, I see in you. You love speaking to people, bringing people into conversations. You have a huge audience. It's exciting for you to share these insights, new books, have your audience send in questions. So it's natural that Miss Suki, of course, also is just open-hearted and ready to embrace new people, interact with them, welcome them. So that joie de vivre, that passion that you have for engaging with new people in conversation, she absolutely reflects that, right? Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't the flip side of that, to help you kind of stand in that relationship with her and maybe provide a little bit of boundaries, maybe provide a little more guidance. Because although you're very welcoming of everyone and very open-hearted, when people come into our home or we engage with new people, they may have different boundaries than us. So the lesson there to teach sweet Suki is, little one, we're gonna have protocol. We want to make sure we're doing traditional training, and that we're gonna ask her to sit, look, engage with you, and then, okay, say hello calmly. And then you pull her out pretty quickly. And so, but what that also is teaching you is to manage that interaction, to sometimes set those boundaries. Whereas at your essence, I imagine you just want to talk to everyone. If you're probably the most fun person at a dinner party because you'll engage and talk and bring people into conversation, but sometimes it's more appropriate to have those boundaries. So from a traditional standpoint, there's that opportunity to give her, protocol so that we have a polite canine citizen. And energetically, it's for you to kind of manage and step into that relationship dynamic and set that boundary for her.
Well, you were very flattering. She is a super high extrovert for sure. And as you're talking, it's making me think a lot about what happens when somebody really needs their dog to help them with their emotions. Like, I don't need Suki to help me with my emotions. She could be the dog she is. And it is hilarious that she is a high extrovert. I do have to say that is true. Um, but I wonder about people who are actually feeling very anxious
Yeah.
and, the struggle they may have when they've got like, I don't know, a high extrovert dog or a jumpy dog and they're already feeling anxious and they don't know how to deal with it. Like, we've worked out some strategies, Suki and I and the family members around. But, it does make me think about what happens energetically if it can create disharmony in the home.
Mm-hmm. The disharmony in the home that I found is usually the boiling point, right? I can't ignore this anymore because our animal companions do a few things for us when it comes to personal development and growth. Odds are when they come to us, there's already, anxiety created because of long-term relationships or, experiences in childhood. So, it's not that the anxiety there somebody is feeling or a pet parent is feeling has just started because of this pet's behavior. The pet's usually bringing up to the top something that's been simmering under the surface. And so when our animal companions come to us, a few things that they make us do. They teach us to be observers and face triggers. So if I feel like I'm anxious about my pet, that's going to make me face that anxiety. Now I got to do something about it. It doesn't serve me anymore to just kind of sit back and deal with that anxiety. I've got to work with my animal companion on this. So we face those triggers. They also teach us in those moments to clear our energy. Because if I have a dog who's barking on leash, right, during walks, lunging at dogs, lunging at bicycles, if I'm walking that dog and I have that anxiety, I have that fear, I'm like, oh my gosh, a dog is coming, let me, tighten up. That's not going to change my pet's behavior. That's not going to serve my pet. Me being anxious is actually adding more fuel to the fire of that experience. So what they teach us to do is no matter what I'm experiencing, I've got to take a deep breath. I've got to find that stability within. Because if I'm cool, calm, and collected on leash with my pet, they're going to pick up on that energy and respond accordingly. So they help us face our fears and triggers. They help us clear our energy. They also teach us to trust our own intuition. Because in that same scenario, if I'm on leash and I'm walking with a pet and I feel like, there's something just not right about that dog, or my dog's going to have a reaction, I'm going to trust my intuition. I'm going to turn the other way, or I'm going to, cross the street. And then my dog is able to kind of sense that confidence. I've kind of trusted my own inner voice and I've had a good reaction. Now I learn to trust my intuition a little bit more. And in doing it throughout this whole process, they also help us access, activate, and put into action new habits, new abilities, new gifts. And so now I'm learning that I can be more confident on leash. I know that when my body language is different, people, animals, my own pets respond to me differently. And now I can parlay those same habits into my job at work when I'm walking into a meeting. Now I can use that same stability. So through the process of training, they help us sort through and work through our own emotional baggage, but also come up with strategies on how to address them. Now that's when I know what's going on. I have a beautiful example of a pet parent who didn't quite even realize there was something that needed to be addressed, but the pet did, and the pet mirrored it for her in a beautiful way. And this is an example, which is in my book, about separation anxiety. There was this one dog who I'd worked with when I was in New York. Then I moved to California. They wanted to do a follow-up session, so we did it via Zoom. And so I was working with them on separation anxiety. We had the little dog's bed in the pet parent's room. And so we were working on the pet parent stepping out of the room and coming back without the dog really kind of getting activated and upset and anxious and stressed. And so we were doing all the traditional training methods and nothing was really working. And I kind of sat there and I go, you know what? Let's try something. And so I said, do me a favor and find something that means a lot to you in your room. And so she pulled this little teddy bear and held it. I said, okay, what can you explain to your dog why this is important to you? And so she explained and she hugged it and she said, this is my childhood, toy. It's one of the few things that I brought with me through childhood. And I said, okay, now tell your dog that you need him to watch that for you when you leave and that when you come back, you'll take it, you'll retrieve it from him. In that moment, she went through that exercise with love in her heart. She kind of passed it off to her dog and walked out of the room. The dog took that teddy bear, went into his little bed and waited calmly for the first time, no barking. And because I was on Zoom, I was able to see this whole thing like a fly on the wall. And so she walked back in. We did what she said. She took, the teddy bear back, said, thank you so much, sat down. And I go, he needs a job to do. And she started getting really emotional. And I was like, what's going on there? She's like, you know what? It breaks my heart because I love him so much. Because the takeaway that we realized is he needs a job to do. And if she gives him something that he realizes she thinks is precious, then she'll be sure to come back. It's like insurance. And she was like, my God, I love him so much. How could he think I would not be returning to him? He's amazing. And then we kind of went into this parallel where in her childhood, she felt as a young child that unless she was contributing, helping, or doing something, she wasn't of value to her parents, that she wouldn't be loved. So in that instance, for example, we're working on something very specific like separation anxiety exercises. But what our pet is uncovering for us is this huge emotional aha, which had been, playing through all her relationships in our lives. And so in being able to shift that behavior for a pet, she was also able to shift her own relationships and see her lives in bigger ways. So
Wow.
that's a small example of
Well, no, that's a huge example. You're blowing my mind with it. It's just incredible that this woman, now I get this energetically because, even just when we logged on at the beginning of the show, and you and I were just chatting casually before we started, and I can always get a sense energetically of another person, just like you probably can energetically. You connect, and, if you let yourself feel the electronic field you're sharing, you can usually pick up quite a bit on the other person. So what you said to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and then right after we finish this piece of it, we're going to get to our many, many, many questions because people are obviously really interested in what you're saying, and it's just brilliant. So the dog could connect with what this owner was saying emotionally. Emotionally, this individual had connected with what we would call, from a psychological perspective, a transitional object, something that is meaningful to the individual that has kept them feeling calm and stable and intact for many years, maybe even from youth. And they've been able to use that transitional object for self-soothing. And probably because this individual was holding and sharing this transitional object energetically, the animal, given how smart they are emotionally, animals could perceive the importance and the love that this individual had for this transitional object and took it with the same sincerity that it was given. How profound is that? Like, that is amazing.
And it's interesting because, to your point, as pet parents, as people on our path of personal development, all of us are so empathic, right? A lot of us are more intuitively attuned than we give ourselves credit for. So the same way that our animal companions can read a room, we can read a room. To your point, how many times have you walked into a, board meeting and we're like, oof, someone, something just went down. We can sense those things. So with our animal companions, we communicate them, with our words. They have the capability to understand as much as a 2-year-old human child. I think it goes beyond that. But they understand our words, they understand our energy, and they understand our emotions. So they read all of that and they're able to apply it. And because we love them so much and we can be that open-hearted, we can read them very well too. Their body language. I mean, pet parents know that ear goes like this. They're like, oh, I know what that means. Your pet's different barks. So we have that beautiful relationship, which also makes us vulnerable enough that we're open enough to share those stories about our childhood, because we know our pets aren't going to judge us. We know that they want the best for us. There's no hidden agenda or ulterior motive. So having that ability to be vulnerable with them makes our animal companions amazing dress rehearsals to understand ourselves, what we're working on, and then applying them to different, more complicated, complex relationships in our lives. So they're amazing dress rehearsals in that way.
Amazing. That is incredible. Okay. I want to start covering a few of these emails because they're coming in fast and furious. Okay. So let's go through a few of them, see how we do. This is from Walt. Thank you, Walt, for the email, and hoping Anna gets well. Yes, I'm working on it. Thank you. What did Denise think of the TV show, The Dog Whisperer? Was that legit? I used to follow that show.
I love that question. And I always say, when it comes to dog training, the Cesar Millan, who was, the face of the Dog Whisperer, he did an amazing job in putting out that message into pop culture that our animal companions need training and they need leadership, right? Now, I don't believe or ascribe to his methods. There's a lot of controversy around them. But for me, I specialize in positive reinforcement training, which is more collaborative. It's not based in punishment. It's based in teaching your pet better behaviors and rewarding those instead. Because if we're punishing our pets for doing things like barking or, lunging or whatever, that's just what animals do in nature. Punishing them teaches them, in my opinion, that when we're stressed, we resort to physical manipulation and violence. So then they're going to learn that if they're stressed, that's what they're going to do when they perceive there's someone younger or weaker. That might be, a baby in the household. So whereas his dominance was, his leadership was very dominance based, mine is rooted more in benevolent leadership, where it's about collaboration, teaching, creating problem solvers, and rewarding them. And that's kind of the path that traditional dog training has taken. We're leaving those dominance-based, fear-based tactics. We're moving more into positive reinforcement, where we recognize the importance of foundational, basic obedience. We also have recognized a lot as an industry that our pets need mental stimulation. They need those puzzle toys. We need to build their confidence. And what I'm proposing is what I believe is the new era and the new way forward in pet guardianship, which is we also have to look at our energetic connection, how our energy, our own motivations as humans also affects the decisions and energy of our pets. Because when we look at things in terms of, the physical, the mental, the energetic, then we get that trifecta. I mean, we do that in many other areas in our life. So we're just really bringing that into our relationship with our pets. It's on the coattails of conscious parenting with human kids. We're just translating that to our animal companions.
Nice. Here's another one. And I know this is something that you are well versed in, and it is a really, really important topic. And I think it's a really important topic from a psychological perspective, especially with many of the clients that I work with. This is from Tommy. Thank you so much for your email. And it says, how do we deal with pet loss?
That is a great question. So that is the toughest part of pet guardianship for sure, right? This is the moment where we're saying goodbye to our beloved family member, whether it's a sudden, accident or something dramatic that happens, or maybe it's a long goodbye. And in those moments, it's really almost like the final test of our relationship. Everything that we've worked on with our animal companions, facing our triggers, rising above together, learning about new aspects of ourselves, finding new strength in ourselves that we didn't even realize we had. Now we have to put it all into action. And there's a few things I say to pet parents who are in that moment of transition. First and foremost, it is a sacred moment in your relationship. It is time to be quiet, it's time to be introspective, it's time to really listen to them so that you can really create that moment of connection before they transition. The second thing I like to say is, as pet parents, that's one of the top things pet parents come to me about. They're like, but how do I know if I said, were they suffering? What if they're suffering, I can't deal with that. The one thing that our animal companions tell me time and time again is they don't have the same connection that we have to our physical bodies. They're able to kind of sidestep and dissociate a little better. So if they're experiencing pain, they can kind of sidestep a little bit and come back. So our animal companions aren't as attuned to pain, and they also live in the moment. So they don't have that anticipation of like, okay, I feel good, okay, but ooh, what if tomorrow I wake up and I'm not feeling good again? They don't have that. So all of that anxiety around pain, we can just let go. They're able to ride it out and they're okay from one moment to the next. And then the other thing that pet parents say about pet loss is, oh my gosh, I wasn't there. I wasn't there when, I was traveling and then my animal transitioned, and oh my gosh, I wasn't there for them. And what our animal companions have also shared time and time again is they remember, and this is also advice to us as pet parents, remember the entirety of the relationship. That was a moment, that was a blip on the radar. It's for us to focus, and our animal companions absolutely focus on the breadth of the experience together. So this is the time to remember that our animal companions are still around us. So many of us, even our pets transition, we hear the little clatter of their collar. We're like, wait a minute, that can't be, but we hear it. That happens. Or a lot of the pet parents I work with, they're sleeping, and in that moment, right between before they wake up, they feel the weight of the animal companion on their leg where they used to sleep on the bed. That's them saying hello. So our animal companions, even though they're not physically with us anymore, they stay around us just like loved ones do. We're able to access that energy and connection. So don't feel guilty about it. Remember that however they transitioned or whatever those final stages were, that's not the bulk of the relationship. There was all those wonderful times too as well. And remember that even departed, they stay with us in our heart.
That's so interesting. Such good advice. And I have to say that I've heard a lot of those stories from clients as well, where they speak of that sense that that animal's still around them in some kind of remarkably tender way, and to just allow that to be part of your life, and enjoy the sweetness of it without questioning it, because we think we have the answers to everything, but the reality is we don't have the answers to most things. So that's really nice. This is from Holly. I'm going to continue reading emails because there's so many of them and they're so interesting. This is from Holly, who says, I am a fan of Denise. This is such an interesting topic since millions of people have pets that are not trained. Help. Keep up the great work, Holly. That's really for you personally, Denise. I thought you should just take that one in.
Thank you. That is so sweet. And our pets train us as much as we train them. So even if we're not actively training them, they're teaching us a whole lot. So
Well, you've got me thinking about what Suki's training me, so I'm going to have a fresh look when I spend a little bit more time with her and kind of really think about what her language is trying to teach me, because we all have ways that we need to grow and learn about ourselves, and some of the ways that you pointed out make a lot of sense to me. So I think it's a really interesting thing, especially if people have animals in their home, and maybe they're not trained service animals, but they're there to help us grow as well. This one is from Kylie. Thank you for your email, Kylie. Hello back. Does Denise offer remote training?
I do. I do remote training via Zoom, via FaceTime. You get a recording. I also have instantly downloadable mindful dog training videos. So there's a whole lot of ways to connect. And
And
I
how do people get in touch with you? What's your website?
It's petprana.com. So pet means particularly cherished, which I love. We call it, pet project. We can be teacher's pet, but so pet. And then prana means the energy connecting the universe. So it speaks to our kind of connection together. So it's petprana.com.
Nice. And of course, your books, Translating Your Pet's Behavior, A Mindful Approach to Dog Training. And I think you've written another one.
I'm in the process of writing another one, which is actually with a partner of mine in Canada. I love my Canadian partners. And it's going to be about how to kind of help rehabilitate lab tested beagles, and kind of the special considerations and how they teach us about ourselves and that complex that we have about saving, rescuing, but how we can do it in an empowered way. And speaking of, I think what I would hope is that anyone listening to this interview goes exactly what you said, Dr. Anna, which is, wow, now I'm thinking about how my pet is kind of teaching me in my life. And I would want to offer up 4 questions that no matter what, whether your dog is trained, is not, whether you have a snake, a bird, you can ask yourself these 4 questions. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what they're teaching us specifically, overarching lesson that our animals companions teach about us is to get to know ourselves better, to understand ourselves better so that we can love ourselves better with that same unconditional love that they show us. And these 4 questions help us get to that point. If your dog is barking, or maybe they're doing something you absolutely love, like giving you licks in the morning, you want to kind of hold that experience or interaction or pet behavior in your mind. And then you want to ask yourself, what emotions come up for you when you just tap into that moment, that remembrance or that experience? Does it we want to figure out, are the emotions, start naming them. Where do you feel them in your body? And then you want to ask yourself, where else have you experienced similar emotions? Right? And so if my dog's barking, for example, if they're barking, I might feel frustrated. And where do I feel that? In my throat, it tightens, right? I'm like, oh, stop barking. Come on, buddy. If I think about where else in my life do I experience those similar emotions, I might think, you know what? Last week at that meeting, when I gave a suggestion and nobody responded, and then 2 seconds later, somebody repeated the exact same thing, and everyone's like, fantastic, that's wonderful. It's like, oh my gosh, really? Right? I felt that same thing. It was in my throat as well. Then you want to ask yourself, what belief, mindset, or habit is that kind of mirroring back to you? And so for me, it might be like, you know what? I'm never heard. I'm never heard. Nobody ever listens to me. That might be the belief that kind of comes up with that emotion, that frustration. And then you want to ask yourself, are you ready to change the story? Because sometimes we're not. Sometimes we have to sit with it, process it, be mad at it, be angry, kind of be with it. But sometimes it's like, yeah, you know what? I've had enough. Let's shift this thing. And so you start thinking about, how can I create a more positive mindset? How can I reframe that? And I'll come up with a mantra like, you know what, my voice matters and what I say is important. So then I can use that. So if my dog starts barking again, before I even start doing training, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to say, my voice matters, what I say is important. And now I'm approaching it from a completely different energy. So not only is my energy more calm and consistent and ready to, engage with my pet in a way that's productive, it's not rooted in frustration, but I also just learned a lot about myself in this moment. And what I've found through, working with so many clients is, as pet parents are able to embody the shift in their mindset, the pet's behavior tends to show the same, and the behavior dissipates or goes away, and they're able to create that long lasting shift for their pet's behavior, but also for themselves more generally in life. That's a quick little process that you can do at any point in the day and just go through, and it helps just bring that awareness to your energy, which ultimately will translate to the relationship and the collaboration with your pet.
And we can always use some self-reflection. So if it's our relationship with our animal that's giving us that opportunity, it's a pretty unavoidable. It's like, if your dog is jumping all over the place or barking, and the first thing you do is react to them rather than say, hey, what's going on inside of me? How might this be connected? It might not give you an immediate answer, but it might connect with something that is important and potentially transformative. So that is very profound. Here's another one. This one is from Kim. Should our pets be involved with activities in our daily lives, or are they, well, just pets?
I love that. Well, if you are a pet groupie like I am, they should be involved in absolutely everything because it brings me joy. However, as pet parents, we also have to be mindful of why we're bringing our animal companions into our daily activities. Is it out of guilt? Is it, because we feel they should? Then that is something to look at, right? And that is at the root of separation anxiety. Separation anxiety in our pets reflects an opportunity for us to really revisit our boundary setting, how we balance our needs versus other people's needs, that guilt if we take time for ourselves. Because what I find is with our animal companions, anytime that we're having an instinct or I feel like there's an absolute that I feel towards my pet, like I absolutely have to take them everywhere. I have no choice. There's no flexibility. When we're dealing in absolutes, there's usually something to be looked at. And when there is, as pet parents, a lot of times we might feel like, okay, so I get that there's something that I need to look at, but I mean, I don't even know where to start. And that's where that's where I created a framework that helps give you a starting point. Because if I learned one thing in advertising, it was to understand underlying motivation, even when people couldn't really express what motivated them. You're always able to kind of pull that out. And I also learned how to categorize things, right? You have to segment audiences. You have to come up with a product portfolio that, this product is for this person. You have to segment. So with our pet's behavior, I've created this roadmap that gives you that jumping off point to really revisit. And what I found, is basically the solution lay in the problem, right? So if your dog's barking, how are you using your voice? If your pet is aggressive or over exuberant around, guests, how do you perceive people entering your space or your energy? If your cat has a virus in their eye, where can you perceive things differently in your life? So we can always use any experience, inkling, instinct towards our pets and really turn it back on ourselves and ask ourselves, okay, what's that showing about me? And as long as your motivation is pure, you're not being guilted into, taking your pet everywhere, let it be. I mean, they're the best little co-pilots.
Well, I want to refer back to your book again, Translating Your Pet's Behavior, a Mindful Approach to Dog Training. It's more like a psychological approach to dog training. And I'll just reference a couple of the chapters because it's interesting, just the way in which you dive into it. Each of the chapters, that I'm looking at in the second part, are specific to areas that, you might be struggling with. But then it goes into actual activities, different ways to manage the behaviors, your sense of what might be actually getting activated with inside of you. And it really gets you connected in a meaningful way with not just changing the animal's behavior, but really looking at it in a very personal lens, which I think is a very unique approach. In most cases, it really does focus on specifically the steps and follow through. This gets you a little bit more of a deep dive, which is, quite interesting. Here's another one. This is from Sue. Thank you, Sue. She says she wants me to get well, and I promise I am. I'm so much better than I was on Monday. Is exercise important for a dog?
Yes, I love that. So, my whole framework and training strategy is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The same hierarchy of needs that we have as humans. We need to be physically well, we need to be safe, then we need to have, emotional connections before we can, reach those moments of self actualization where we step into our purpose. Our pets need the exact same thing. So anytime our pet is having a behavior that we're looking to shift, maybe it's barking, right? Let's go back to that one. We want to make sure that physically they're okay. There's nothing going on with their thyroid. They're getting enough physical activity. They're running around, right? That's going to be important. Next, we want to ask ourselves, are they getting enough mental stimulation in their day? Are we giving them jobs to do? Are we teaching them new obedience commands? Are we playing games with them? Are we taking them to new environments to kind of sniff around and engage with new sights and sounds and smells? If that's a check, yes, now we go to that energetic connection. Okay, so what's that talking about? I know barking has to do with benevolent leadership, me taking on benevolent leadership. Where am I maybe sidestepping becoming that leader? Where do I feel maybe I'm not being heard, or maybe I'm not using my voice? Maybe I'm silencing myself, right? But we can't get to that energetic connection until we're making sure that physically everything's okay and we've created a routine that's beneficial for them. Because your pet may be bored. And if that's the root motivation, then when you look at the energy, we want to make sure that the motivation behind what we're looking at energetically matches. Because if that's the scenario, you're not giving a proper routine for your pet, or there's physically something going on, the energy behind it is, am I bored in my life? It's very different than I'm not using my voice or I'm not being heard. So it's important that we kind of check off those boxes to understand what's driving the energy behind the behavior.
Wow. Here's an interesting story. This is from Lisa. Thank you for sending this in. And the title of it, which I'm going to read, is Dogs That Come Into Our Life as We Need Them. So she says, just wanted to share this sweet story. My daughter has multiple food allergies and anaphylaxis. Our dog Mojo joined our family 12 years ago. He is anaphylactic to bees. We found this out after he was stung. And he's also allergic to some of the shots, like the rabies shots. So we have to pre-treat him, etc. I really believe that this special creature helps in his small way to allow her, the writer's daughter, to feel less alone in this scariness. And she says, feel better, and thanks, as always, for the show. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I am feeling way better. No, obviously, I still sound terrible, but I am feeling a little better. What do you think of that, that connection? Isn't that interesting?
Agree 1,000%. You know, having your daughter not feel alone and having a buddy in it, I think that's a big part of it. I think there's also an aspect where, you know, just like people in our lives come into our lives for different chapters, for different reasons, you know, I do think that we have similar relationships with our animal companions, and that animal companion came into your life as well because you're already experienced with all that. If it was a single 20-year-old who's, you know, out partying, they might not be able to take care of the pet the way that it needed. So I think it's that really beautiful symbiotic relationship. That pet knew that you would be able to care for it in the way that it needed. And also, it was able to provide that beautiful emotional support for your daughter. So, to her point, the pet comes into your life as you need it, and you guys help each other, you fulfill each other's needs.
Nice. This one is from Ken, and personally, I think this is a great one. I noticed that smaller dogs, lap dogs, etc., are a lot more yappy than larger dogs. Why is that? I have a neighbor's little dog who doesn't shut up, barking all the time. I have another neighbor who has a black lab who is quiet as a mouse and very well behaved. Do people treat these little dogs as babies? Is that right to do? It is very annoying.
That is so funny. And we see that all the time as pet trainers, as, you know, pet parents are with our neighbors, all that stuff. And so it's not only necessarily in pets, right? I mean, pets have earned that nickname of Napoleon complex from humans too. We see kind of some similar aspects in humans. And I think it has to do with presence, right? A lot of times when pets are big and stable like labs, they don't need to make themselves seen or heard because they naturally are. They walk into a room and they have that presence due to their sheer size and their ability to take up space physically. When it comes to smaller animal companions, they don't have that same presence. They don't have that same space. They don't have that same mass. So they take up space using their voice. That's how they kind of show themselves. And I think this whole notion of taking up space is really, really an interesting one. This is a big topic that I see with a lot of my pet parents. A lot of the pet parents I work with who are highly empathic and sensitive, they're not very comfortable taking up space in their life. They don't want their emotion to take up space. They don't want to be seen necessarily. They kind of stay small because they tend to be in the servant role. They're the ones who are tending to their family, to their friends. They're the ones taking care of everyone. So they're not necessarily confident taking up space in their life. And a lot of times it's those little smaller dogs and the yappiness that really forces the pet parent to face this issue of taking up space because they need to be that presence for the smaller pet. So the pet feels that they will both be seen. So there's so much that goes on when we have the small yappy pets, a lot of richness there to dive into.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Okay, so here's another one that I don't know where you're going to go with this, but this is from Matt. Thank you for your question, Matt. Did Denise ever get bitten or hurt by a dog? Does she use any special equipment, protection to train dogs?
Mhm. That's a great question. So, as a dog trainer, my passion and my area of expertise is puppy 101. So it's, young puppies or dogs who recently came into the home, and pet parents are really looking to create just a foundational routine, foundational communication, foundational relationship. That's my passion. So if somebody calls me with an aggressive dog or a dog that's been deemed aggressive, I typically, I ask questions to make sure, like, okay, is it something that I can, take on and manage? If not, I'll always refer to someone else. Because just like, you had a science teacher, a biology teacher, a math teacher, an English teacher, different trainers specialize in different things. Now, there was one time that I did get almost bitten by a dog. And if you'll believe it, it was a dog that was a puppy that I'd been training since 8 weeks of age. And so this was an amazing, sweet dog, love of my life. I saw him almost daily for, I want to say, almost a year. And what was happening in my life is I took him on as a client when I first moved to Los Angeles. So I was still building my client base. So I did like daily adventures with him, which are things that I don't really offer and never intended to offer. And then as my business built and I started, doing more interviews and getting more opportunities, I would start pushing those away and saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't do that interview because I was doing adventures, taking the dog for walks and, exploring. And so one day I sat down and out of nowhere, he kind of went for me a little bit. And I was like, no, little one, take it easy. I held my energy, we resolved it. But in that moment, the message was, you can't be doing this anymore. You got to go on and do the next phase of your work. So it was actually a really loving interaction that I had with that dog who I feel is like an amazing little, soul. The bite was the best way that he could communicate. It's time to move on. You got to put your focus on these other things. You can't hold yourself back just to kind of spend this fun time with me. So that's my only one and only. And it wasn't quite a bite, it was a threat. And I read it and I was like, gotcha, little one, here we go.
If you're willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. If you're willing to listen, yes.
Right. That's probably a life lesson for most of us, whether it's with a dog or anything else. If you're willing to listen, we can get ourselves into big trouble when we just hold on to things as they are and fail to, let go of something or move on or, change our lives in little ways, if we're willing to listen. Now, we've only got 2 minutes left. It has been an absolutely delightful show. We do have more questions, but what I'd really like to do, Denise, is first of all, thank you very much for joining us. It was really, really informative and fun and just a great way to start the new year. But I want to ask you, is there anything that you think our listeners might benefit from hearing that I didn't ask you already, or somebody else didn't ask you or talk about? I'd like to just, let you tell us what you think we should know before we sign off, which we're going to do in a minute.
Absolutely. So, a lot of us have actual pets. We have dogs, we have cats who live with us, birds, snakes, whatever it might be. If you're a listener who still feels very close to animals but doesn't have a pet, we can still have these experiences with animals in the wild. Squirrels that we see during the day, birds that we're particularly drawn to. All of these animals throughout our lives deliver messages, right? Give us a moment of introspection, help us kind of understand and go deeper. So if you are a pet parent or you're just someone who loves animals in general, they're always here to teach us something. And when in doubt, what they're teaching us is the overarching message of being the energy you want to see in the world. So if I want my pet to be calm, I've got to be calm. That's how they pick up on it. If I'm excited by seeing this squirrel and I'm watching them and I'm delighting in the fact that they're running around and hiding their little, acorns and doing their thing, where can I be more fun, more curious, more adventurous? Where can I start saving for myself or investing in myself? So, no matter what, our animal companions are always bringing beautiful insights into our lives, whether they're caterpillars or, big Bernedoodles. We all have, we have a relationship with all of them, and there's always something we can learn. There's a partnership.
Thank you so much for joining us, Denise. I want to say goodbye to everybody. Be gentle with yourself and, well, enjoy your pets or your pets that are soon to be in your life. Be well, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with your host, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.